Hi, this is a foreigner in the Philippines. One of the things that I think needs to be addressed for those who are going to be in a situation like I am in, I am well familiar with what is involved in being an expat, in being the foreigner. So I know that lots of people, I get many letters, many emails, messages on Messenger, and they have a particular perspective about the kind of simple life that I lead, and they express admiration for the fact that I have managed to be able to live a simple life. And one very recently, in the last couple of days, said, you have shown that it's possible for an older expat, a retiree is how he put it, to come to the Philippines and live a simple, modest life and be happy. And I hope that I have done that. Now, what has it meant to me personally? I have to tell you that I am a person who is able to be in his own company. Now, being alone is not the same as being lonely, but for some, if you're coming out here and you're not used to your own company, now, you're going to have to get used to it very quickly, because unless you speak the language, which to my shame, I do not, you're going to be insulated against the outside world. How can I put this so that it doesn't seem as if you're just completely cut off? An ex of mine, it must be obvious to most that I've had more than my share of relationships, and I've been much better at breaking up than I have at holding on. So that's my confession. But I've learned, and I've talked before about the fight or flight mechanism, which people are much more engaged in than they think, or than they are in fact aware of. And that is that there comes a point at which you are unable to handle what is happening in your life right then, right up in your face in that moment, and you take flight and you run away from it. When I look back now, perhaps there are times when I shouldn't have taken flight, and had I had what it took, either in education or awareness or I don't know, courage, maybe I would still be back there, and happy or not. So how does this now leave me for in this moment? Well, something that I learned from one of the relationships that I had. I've been married more than once, and at one point I was curious as to why the person that had left me, and this is not a sad story, the person that had left me, we were still on good terms. And so one day I asked her, what was it? Why did you leave? Why was I not enough? And she says something very interesting that you would not think of as a reason for taking flight, as she did. She said, you never needed anybody. So evidently, I've put this shell, or had at the time, put this shell around me where I didn't need anybody, you know, which I interpret almost as a protective coat of indifference, where you can go or you can stay, I'm not going to be hurt. Sounds terrible, and it sounds arrogant, which it's not arrogance, it's I don't know, some sense of being unwilling to really totally commit, and I've now gotten through that, and I've handled that. But I am able to be alone. When I first came out to America, 1992, and I had my son, my then Filipino wife had the other two boys. One of them was not my son, one of them was, and that son was the youngest, and he was very close to his mum, and is still very close to his mum. The other boy was close to me, and it just happened. They were given the choice. Even at that early age, they were given the choice. And my son Luke chose to come with me. I would not be able to have taken the other boy, Paul, who was my stepson anyway. I would not have been allowed to take him, even though he wanted to come. So we arrived in California, and we had a tough time. We had help from former family members, which we would not have been able to survive so easily had we not had that help. And I learned to be alone, and actually I passed that on to my son then, and apparently he is a very self-sufficient person, for good or worse, right? For better or for worse. Now when you come out here, you are insulated against your immediate outside world by the fact that you don't speak the language. Now, if you're one of those people, and I know people like this, who immediately get engaged in the language and learn and thrive on it, and soon they're talking to people and understanding them. In the Philippines, it's possible to speak English and to not speak Visayan or Tagalog wherever you go, and most people will understand you. Even if they can't talk back, they will understand you, so you can be spoiled. But I get up in the morning, short of the two kids, which are Bibi and Taliklik, who understand me and speak a little English. Talik more and more, and Bibi is coming on as well on the English. And Beth is my person. She is the pillar around which I build my life here. I go down. I see my brother-in-law Rado. He never speaks to me, but he doesn't not speak to me. Do you understand how this could be? He is unable to speak English, and is totally open to me. If I say, "Hello, Rado," he nods and smiles, but he will rarely speak anything, but he always smiles, and I know that there's a bond there. I accept him as my brother. Nanai, who I feel that I was never a great son. When my mother was alive, I wasn't really what you would call a good son. And so, even though, ironically, my mother-in-law is younger than I am, she has the aura of a mother, and she is called by everyone, she is called Nanai, and Nanai means mother. So I call her Nanai, and I've said to Beth, I count this as an opportunity to be able to be a good son. And so I make that adjustment, and I make that commitment, and that's how I treat her, and that's how I feel about her, and she is like my mother. There is no father. Beth's father died 4 or 5 years ago, I believe. So the other members of the family, I treat them as if they are my family. But mainly, no one speaks English except to me. So you understand that all around me, a foreign language is being spoken. Unless spoken directly to me, in which case, as good or as bad as their grasp of English language is, that's how they will speak to me. And usually the Filipinos have an expression called a nosebleed, and nosebleed is when they're afraid of speaking English because they'll embarrass themselves. Even when I've often said to people, even people who serve me in a store, I wish that I could speak Visayan as well as you speak English, and they take that as a big compliment. But for the main part of it, I am this insulated being who goes around and is totally self-sufficient. Now, I'm okay with that. You have to ask yourself, will you be okay with that? And will you be able to discipline yourself to being able to speak the language? Because you have a problem there. Do you speak Tagalog and be able to communicate generally, listen to the radio, listen to watch television, see movies, all in Tagalog? Visayan is the local language for me. It might not be for you. It might be something else. If you're in, say, San Fernando, it's Kapampangan. So there are different dialects which are local. Now for me, the local language would be Visayan. But if I go to, say, Manila, nobody will understand me if I am only able to speak Visayan. So you can see there's a dilemma. If you're having trouble contemplating the idea of learning one language, imagine what it would be like to have to learn two. So that's something I'm struggling with right now. But I can get through the day quite easily, even here in this small community with sisters-in-law, with brothers-in-law, with a mother-in-law, and children who all speak a little English, and I can communicate to them in some way, but not fully. So you end up, you form, if you're lucky, you will find an expat who you can be friends with. This is not as easy as it sounds, because it's not automatic that the expat that you meet will be someone that you can be friends with. Now, I'm very lucky now, as of fairly recently, there is a man who coincidentally was born in the same city that I was. That's Manchester in the UK. He was born in Manchester. He left and went to New Zealand, and he now has a farm with his wife Bonnie, who is Filipina, and the farm is Zamora, and it is an absolutely beautiful paradise of a place. And at least once a week on a Sunday we meet. I have a Sunday driving job where I pick up children and get them to church and their parents wherever is needed. and then I go into Taliban, and I usually have to go to the bank, make a withdrawal when it's not a huge long line, and then I go and meet my friend Mike, and we have breakfast. We have breakfast and talk, and we talk freely in English, and also, as it happens, same kind of humour, Mancunian dry humour. He knows exactly what I'm talking about, and vice versa. So it's important, if you can, to find somebody like that. You may end up with very uneasy friendships which you eventually cut because it's not good for you. So you'll have those decisions to make. But ideally, if you can find a friend who you can meet with and be able to converse freely in your native tongue, then that's a good thing. So that's the kind of paradise that I live in. I'm totally adjusted to that. I have no complaints. I have no sad stories. I don't complain about the Filipino people. I observe differences. Certainly I observe differences. The main observation that I have about Filipino people and the Philippines is that they're happy. Now, no matter what the deprivation, no matter what the level of poverty that they live in, they can still smile. The children still seem to have an idyllic childhood, given that they can eat properly, okay? So, those are some of the observations that I've made, and I hope that they help. This is a foreigner in the Philippines. Bye for now, and good luck if you're coming out here.